I'm Dale Smith for Looney Politics, and a mere 10 bills got passed in the fall sitting. It's a really unusually low number, especially when you consider that 4 of those were financial bills and 4 of them were either private members' bills or Senate public bills, meaning a mere 2 government bills got passed. And that's unusual, and it's a little bit concerning. And there's a couple of factors for why this is happening. One of them is the fact that committee work is really slow because they're still insisting on using the hybrid format. That means that committee work can only go for those 2-hour increments. There's no overtime. There's no ability to work longer or to, basically get things done. The hybrid model, particularly with committees, is extremely limiting. And MPs are still insisting that they need this system, even though we can't really see any need for it at this point because, frankly, we aren't seeing the pandemic numbers, at least in the parliamentary precinct. And there would be ways at which MPs could mitigate that, but they're choosing not to. The other reason, though, is more structural for how the Canadian Parliament is working, and that's basically that MPs are simply talking bills to death. And we don't see this in several other comparator Westminster countries. And part of the problem is that we've developed this bizarre little power game around simply having MPs read these speeches into the record for hours on end for no apparent purpose. And to compound that, we saw a real rash of what's known as reasoned amendments from the Conservatives, which means basically saying, amending the bill saying that it not be read a second time, or that it be withdrawn, or that everything after, the first preamble be voided, or things like that. And what that ends up doing is just adding more time to the clock because you need to debate that amendment before you can get back to the substance of the bill, and so on and so on. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of talk for almost no bills being passed. And there's a lot of bills still on the order paper at second reading. We don't see this in places like the UK, where for them, second reading is one afternoon. At that point, the speaker looks to see how many people are in the chamber who want to speak to the bill. They divide, he or she divides up the time, and then that's it. It's the afternoon. MPs can ask questions to whoever's speaking during that allotted time, and it goes, you have some actual back and forth debate. Whereas we don't really have that in Canada, where most of the time is spent just reading a speech into the record with no interruptions, with no questions. And the period for questions and comments after that speech is limited and mostly spent by their own side, basically asking congratulatory non-questions or to repeat the party's talking points. And none of this is actually helping debate. And what it is winding up doing is actually suffocating it. Now, the Liberals, in trying to combat this, passed a motion that gave them the ability to declare midnight sittings right up until the end of June as a way of saying, if you want more debate, we'll give you more debate. But what that also winds up doing is limiting committee time because we don't have enough translators and interpreters and resources to keep both the chamber going till midnight as well as committees. And so far the threat has worked. They haven't had to invoke midnight sittings thus far, but we're still seeing only a very small number of bills being passed. And that's something we're going to have to really wrestle with in terms of the incentives that MPs have to do the work going forward. For Looney Politics, I'm Dale Smith.